Hey guys, good morning. Last week you talked about imperialism a little bit. You watched some videos, and I'm going to go a little bit more in detail with that this morning. So, the reason that we're talking about imperialism is because history is written by the victors. Each culture's history, or each society's history, if you take the United States, then the stories that we read in that culture, the ones that are popular, are typically the ones that are told by people in power. That's what it means by the victors. So, what does this mean, and how does it affect literature? All right, well, let's look at first how we read. Why do we read literature? We read literature to learn about the human condition. The human condition is something that we all go through. We all experience the same emotions. We feel the same things. We typically desire the same things. We desire happiness and health and love. Those are part of the human condition. The experience of loss and death, the structure of power in society and how it's implemented, who has the power, who doesn't, the psychology of characters and individuals in general, the sociology and history of cultures that produce specific pieces of literature. Okay. Lots of people write stories and share their stories, but the ones that are told are the ones that we learn about that culture through. So if you're only reading a certain kind of story from a certain culture, then that's the perspective that you have on that culture. So we try to look at different perspectives from people whose stories are not always told, or whose stories are not always popular. That's part of what world literature is supposed to be about. So, how would culture be affected by colonialism and imperialism? You guys talked about that last week and what it means. Imperialism is whenever a powerful country comes in and takes over a not so powerful country, one that is weak or doesn't have the technology or the riches and finances and stuff in their economy to fight back. So the powerful country comes in and says, hey, we've got all these things that we can help you out, and we can make your economy better. We can educate your children, all that. That's imperialism, because they go in, they promise things, they take over, and then they get to do what they want to with the country and its people. So, how would that affect the stories that are shared and told from a country that has been imperialized? Well, let's look. All right, so just to recap, colonialism is the imperialist expansion of Europe into the rest of the world during the last 400 years, in which a dominant country, say Great Britain or Russia, they carried on a relationship of control and influence over its margins. So sometimes they spread out outside of their borders of their original country, and sometimes they went a long distance and formed colonies. All right. It's also defined as control by one power over a dependent area or people. It occurs when one nation subjugates, that's one of your vocabulary words, another, conquering its population and exploiting it, often while forcing its own language and cultural values on its people. Subjugate, like I said, brings under domination or control, especially by conquest. So, which means that they have to fight for control. All right, the colonized and the colonizer and the colonized. The colonizer is often seen as a savior who comes in and saves the natives from themselves and from others. We see this narrative play out in almost every situation where an imperialist country has came in to a native country and taken over. They are the outsider who swoops in, takes over, takes charge, changes up the government, teaches the natives how to be civilized, how to care for, defend, and support themselves. They bring in technology and power. They bring in guns. They bring in new ways to create food and resources, like material resources. But they also take away natural and physical resources from the natives. They take it from the land, and they take it from the actual people themselves. The colonized are seen as the savages in need of education and rehabilitation. They're often seen as weak, in need of guidance and support of the outsider. They're also said to be ignorant and heathen as in like they have no religion, or they believe in many gods. So this is what European colonial empires looked like and what they did with imperialism between 1492 and 2008. So watch this video over here for a minute. All right, I want to watch how it spreads. All right, so Great Britain, here's Russia, Spain, France. Watch how it expands. So this is the areas that they start taking over in their exploration. Look how much Russia took. Okay, England came over to the US during this time. You can see the dates down here of what happens. Watch Africa and Australia here. This has to do with the scramble of Africa. And then you see what happens is during these later dates, we start to decolonize these areas. Those people start to take back control of their countries. But the damage has already been done. Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Sorry. Okay. So, imperialism and colonialism, a policy of conquering and ruling other lands. It existed from the very beginning of mankind's history. And then from 1870, the industrial powers carried out an astonishing expansion. You saw how much, if you look back, you saw how much land they took over throughout the world. Well, that's great for their own country, but it has lasting and devastating effects on the people of the countries that they take over. Come on, work with me. All right. So then we get this thing called the post-colonial. I'm sorry, I'm moving my face. Post-colonial perspective and theory. Post-colonial critics, so we're talking about academics here, are concerned with literature produced by colonial powers. Those are the imperialized or the imperialist people, the Great Britons, the France, the Russia. All right, works produced by those who were colonized. Post-colonial theory looks at issues of power, economics, politics, religion, and culture, and how these elements work in relation to colonial hegemony. Okay, so that means just that they controlled the natives. All right, most post-colonial writers highlight in detail the suffering of the colonized people because their voice is not usually heard. The colonized tell the story of the way things happen. So in America, the story that you are typically told about American literature starts with Christopher Columbus. It doesn't start with the natives that were already here and what they experienced when people came in and colonized the U.S. We hear the perspective of the explorers and how brave they were in this new world that they came in and conquered. Okay, so that's what that means when we say that post-colonial perspective, when we're looking at it from this point of view, we're looking at it from the view of the natives, from the view of the people who had this done to them. All right, decolonized people. Sorry. I hate it when it does that. Come on. There. Decolonized people develop a post-colonial identity, which means that they had their cultural identity that they had before they ever came into contact with the colonizers. And then what happens is their experience through being colonized and their experience interacting with different cultures, their identity starts to change. Just like we talked about with your own personal identity, it grows and evolves. The more experiences you have, the more people you come in contact with, the more groups you start to associate with. Well, the same things happen. The same thing happens with these people. They develop an identity that's a mixture of their native identity and then their post-colonial identity, or the ways that they start to blend in with the colonizing power. Post-colonial theory is a literary theory or approach that deals with literature produced in countries that were once or are now colonies of other countries. It may also deal with literature written in or by citizens of colonizing countries that takes colonies or their people as its subject matter. Here's the important part here. The theory is based around how the colonizer or the natives are seen as the other, as indifferent, less than, bad. And then the resistance that those natives tried to create against the imperialist country. I know that's a mouthful. All right, so let's look at the scramble for Africa. On that other map, you saw how all the different countries were coming in and scrambling to gain access and land in Africa. The reason why is because diamonds were found there. Originally, diamonds were only mined, I know, in Spain, and I can't remember the other country right now, sorry. But they found that Africa was a great resource for diamonds. And so diamond mining became a thing, and everybody wanted a piece of the pie. They all wanted, literally pie, haha. They all wanted ownership here so that they could profit off of the resources. So from 1850 to 1960, Great Britain claimed Nigeria as its own. That's just one example. But why do you think they did this? And what conflicts do you think happened from all of these countries scrambling in, trying to take over these countries where there were natives and there were established people there? Let's watch for a minute.
Divide can be traced back to the late 1800s, during what was called by the imperial European powers the scramble for Africa. Colonization was motivated by the European world for African resources. The subsequent exploitation of the African people and the evolution of their spiritual values by Christian missionaries would leave a permanent European stamp.
When I told you guys that the natives were seen as the other, that's what he just told you. He said that they were seen as savages and heathens and uncivilized, that they needed help. Okay, that's really important. The colonizer, the imperialist countries that came in and took over, he's going to tell you, they had this belief that they were doing these natives a service, that it was their Christian duty to come in and to civilize these people, to introduce them to God and their Christian religion, that kind of thing. This is frustrating. I'm sorry. All right.
Divide can be European hunger for African resources.
You see.
The subsequent exploitation behind it is kind of transparent. But when you've got your food on someone's neck and your profession, you can't say to yourself, I'm so rich. I'm not as well. So what you have to do is figure out somebody saying, oh, there. And that's a very natural position.
Here's the scramble again.
The Southern Bantu-speaking people were given economic, political, and educational advantage. The northern ethnic groups, two in particular, the Acholi and the Langi, were the main recruits for military and police positions.
Okay, and what he's trying to tell you right now is that these conflicts that they're getting ready to talk about occurred because these imperialist countries came in and they created boundaries. They said, you can't, over here, you can't be a part of this group and you can't be a part of this group. And then they even go further. You'll see in, I just lost my train of thought, but you'll see in Rwanda, for instance, that the imperialist country decided that these natives were good and these natives were bad. Well, the natives start to buy into that narrative too, and they start to hate each other. So watch.
By exploiting linguistic, ethnic, and cultural differences between the peoples of the North and South, Britain's divide and rule policies created a tension between them that helped maintain British rule. The French took an east-west slice of the continent as well as Madagascar. The Belgians took Rwanda, Burundi, and the Congo, in what Joseph Conrad called the vilest scramble for loot that ever disfigured the history of human culture.
You see the hands?
Slavery took over 5 million lives. In Rwanda, Belgium entrenched the idea of the Hutu as a workforce and the Tutsi as extenders of Belgian rule. The politicization of these two cultures would profoundly contribute to the genocide of 1994. In Sudan, the British ruled the Arabs in the north and the blacks in the south as separate colonies, only to combine the areas before independence in 1956.
So here's a thought. If these imperialized countries had never came into Africa, we will never know, but there's a chance that all of the violence and the struggles that the African countries have gone through, they may never have faced it. They may never have had this to this extent, the civil wars and the uprisings against the governments and the corruption and the all the fighting and stuff. They may never even had that. Um, we won't know because that was not the way that history went. But you can see that if these, with the with the help of these imperialist countries, it did not get better for the Africans. They exploited the Africans. They used them for labor. They pitted them against each other and made them hate each other, made them fight against each other, all because these imperialist countries wanted their natural resources and they had the power to exploit the people there. How my bad. And what he's saying is that after the colonial powers pulled out, sometimes it was even worse. Now the colonial powers could keep things kind of calm, but whenever they decided that they were no longer going to be in control and they would leave the country to the devices of the people there, well, they've already created division. They've already created this hate of one ethnic group against another. And so you see them fighting for who's going to be in charge now. Now that the colonial power is gone, they would fight against each other, and the stereotypes and the prejudice that they had and that had been created even stronger through the colonization of their country, um, those became bigger, and they started fighting each other. I'm going to go back up. Okay, so here's a cartoon. What perspective do you think that this cartoon is speaking from? So let's read it. So you've got these guys, they're in chains. If we were in class together, I'd ask you what you see. But you see the whip marks on their back. Their faces show frustration, anger, maybe not anger, but struggle, fear, those kinds of things. What do you see in their baskets? What are they carrying? And who are they carrying it for? All right. And then you've got this dude in the back here. And it says, Dear most gracious monarchs of Europe, exploration of the dark continent successful. Treasures galore. And just wait till you see all the new sciences we've invented. Wink, wink. Okay. So they would tell these people, we're going to help you. We're going to give you technology. All you have to do for us is work and help us take all of these things from you. But what they really do is not always what they tell them they will do. All right. So there's this guy named Rudyard Kipling. You may know him from writing the Jungle Book. If you've ever seen Tarzan or the Jungle Book, then that's the kind of thing that he wrote. He wrote about Mowgli. Sorry, not Tarzan. So he wrote this poem, and it was called "The White Man's Burden." Now Kipling was he was from the U.S. No, he wasn't. My bad. Erase. I'm sorry. Anyway, he was not from the US, he was British. But the reason I say that is because Teddy Roosevelt read his poem called The White Man's Burden, and he shared it with another senator. He was like, "This is really interesting. We should read this." The reason that he wrote it was that he was saying that the US should take up the burden of imperialism just like Britain and other nations. But you're going to see some irony in his writing. He writes about the white man's burden, and what the white man's burden was what I said, that imperialists believed and told themselves was that they had a burden to go and to help these savage natives to better themselves, that they had a burden to go and provide them with technology and provide them with resources to care for their kids and to educate themselves so that their country could become economically stronger, just like these powerful countries. That's the narrative that they tell themselves. So, one of the assignments that you have for this week is to go read A White Man's Burden. And you're going to read it and actively learn. It links with your Google Classroom just like everything else that we've done. So, you just sign in with your student email. And that's it for now.